In 1980, Sukkot Tafshim Mem Aleph, the Rebbe asked that there should be a rally of children in 770, that he wanted to speak to them.
Wer sich jeder rief, unheimlich, von Gott kleine Kinder, angerufen, bechem Zivis Hashem, als seien der Eberstens Armee und der Eberstens Soldiers und der Eberstens Offizieren und die, was vielen noch mit der Milchome, mit Nicht-Idigkeit, mit dem Jetzer, und dass es seine Armee, wie sie gewähnt, zum ersten Mal, wenn Jeden seinen angerufen geworden Zivis, Hashem, als jetzt im Bejad Romo, dass wir sein leichter nicht zochen und größer nicht zochen und vollständiger nicht zochen.
The Rebbe says he wants to start a new organization called Tzivos Hashem. The purpose of Tzivos Hashem is that the kids should have missions to do and do extra learning of Torah and doing extra mitzvahs and getting their friends to do it. They should be able to go up in rank, just like a regular army, that by going ahead and doing the different mitzvahs, they can become a sergeant and a major and a colonel, and even they can become a general.
Da me gehe zu Zivis Hashem, ist jeder Tag von dem Jahr, darf man doch aufhören sich, trainieren sich, und tun die Meisim und die Burim und Machshoves, wie der Eberster hat angewiesen, in sein Teiro, mit kleibt sich zusammen von Zeit zu Zeit, Zivis Hashem, in das Azeve Ba'aparei, wird jeder mitbringen mit sich, ein Rekord, aber weiß, als sich aufgeführt hat, am besten Efen, und die, was haben bewiesen, die Beste von zwischen alle, werden sie echt geben, Prosim.
Being that this was something brand new, really had its challenges. From day one, Rabbi Schoenberg Baumgarten was together with me. The Rebbe was involved in every single aspect of Tzivos Hashem, from the logo to the magazine, Mashiach Times. The Rebbe used to be Magia every single cover. There were sacks of mail coming in from all different types of communities. Kids were really, really excited.
Much bless you to see the army of God Almighty, much success and to graduate.
Thank you.
After saying much of it in general.
Thank you.
You're welcome. She's also was not to say army.
She's supposed to get a card. She's yeah, you send it out. She sends it out to her. Thank you.
It was so successful after the first year. We had 60,000 kids that were members.
Meine Kinder sind Chayalim mit Zwölf Hashem, sie Nalukim und so. Mit Zwölf Hashem, so wir gebeten haben, also vom Vater, die Worte vom Reben, wir willen gelernen. Ich habe 8 Kinder, dann gewesen. 8 und dann sind gestartet. Alle, Zwölf Hashem, einer, 2 sind Seren, und einer ist Assar, und einer ist Alif. Ja, dus één van de jaren geleden.
We doen de Chaya Koi.
Kinder from Tzivos Hashem, Shem Shabbos baseball players.
I've been a big supporter of Yerachmiel and Tzivos Hashem, and I would like to continue helping the big Chizuk and Big Yamson. I'm a good friend of his, and
he was also a member of Tzivos Hashem.
Yes.
Not very much. Have you rank also of the general or what is it?
Lieutenant.
Lieutenant. Very much blessed to progress.
There was a rabbi in Queens who had written a letter to the Rebbe complaining about the idea of kids joining an army. They're going to have wars and they're going to fight with each other. The Rebbe wrote him back a 4-page English letter. The Rebbe said, I thought long and hard of what American children today are missing. What's needed today is Kabbalah's oil.
Abisha se kumton a pkudo, a se kumton a norden, as medafton, a die und die Sach, fragt man nicht kein Scheiles, und man sucht nicht kein Timing, und sie mir versteht das ja oder nicht, ist zum alle Mächten erfüllten, der Pkudo, dem Order, von dem, was 4 Tonnen der Armee, weil das ist der Ewigste, weil das ist der Seide bei Jeden, als darf sein, nice Kedem Lenishma.
I would go and visit the Rashbatz whenever I was in New York. In the early years when the Rebbe just started Tzivos Hashem, obviously we had children who had signed up and were involved. And she said to me, I know how it's working here in America, but how have the children reacted in London? And of course, I was able to tell her the great excitement and how keen the kids were to go up in rank and what was happening. And her eyes just shone, and this huge smile came on her face. And she said, it was almost shyly, she said, my husband had a good idea, didn't he?
From when the Rebbe started Tzivos Hashem, you could see how he loved to see the children excited about being members of Tzivos Hashem. This was something that the Rebbe had put his heart and soul into. In our first brochure, we wrote, we want Mashiach today, and the Rebbe crossed it out, and the Rebbe wrote, we want Mashiach now. The motto of Tzivos Hashem is we want Mashiach now, because the kids are going to be the ones who bring Mashiach.
you have an extra thing? You don't have
No, I don't want any more. I have one bunch of them.
This production was made possible through the generosity of the members of the GEM Foundation.
Eine von den Teilen von Zivis Hashem, was man gebeten, aber soll zusammenkleiden jüdische Kinder, Bar Mitzvah und Bas Mitzvah. Und nächster auf die Scheuß, was sicher, der Kol Israel Becheskas, Kasher sehen, bekommen sie Achino, Kosher, in Abeis HaSefer HaMasim, sollen sie Masbir sein und mit Weihe sein. Als sie sein in Zivis Hashem. Und die Rashi bringt darauf mit Perusha Alateira, aber das ist auch gleich von Bechomisch le Mikro. Als Ligiene Shalmele, ist Roihui, aber wir sollen zählen von Ben Chedesh Yomi, was Afal Pia zwischen Iden Gufa, ist Ligiene Shalmele, Shevet Levi, is bei Erech von Kol Oilam Kule, is jeder in Niktan und Wat Getelom Zivis Hashem, wie sie schön geworden, gleich, wenn Iden seine Nareis, sie sich Eretz Mitzrayim, sie dämmel bekommen, dem Nomen und dem Teer in Teera Semes, Jotzu Al-Zivis Zivis Hashem, Ho Anoshim ve'Anoshim ve'Ata. Und da hat Goshe Meyuchodo, wie bald da sie seinen Fall Baru Bas Mitzvah, dachten sie sich auf nach Chinuch beim Yuchod, bei Yeser Seis und bei Yeser Reis. Dies aber die Gemorre sagt in Kedush nach Chinuch Igor. Do von Ben Yutches oder bis Ben Chov Dalet, wie hat die Yodach Albreich, I do dem nach Iker HaChinuch is nach Kedem Bar oder Bas Mitzvah, was demol do menechet beworren in Komur Loyil bei Taihu Alei Alayru. In Nesef auf die Scheuß, wenn sie sein in ihm besser Sefer, sollen sie zusammenkleiden mit dem Inyan, als sie sein in Chalokim, und sie seien Bar Mitzvah, Bas Mitzvah, der Meshach Hazman, aber schön nichts, seien sie schön in Zivis Hashem, und wie einer, was gefühlt sich bei Zowa, und hier durch der Wort von der Siderene von Rebendem Schwer, als Eber ist bald Zowa, wird bekommen der richtige Mustrierung, der richtige Chinuch, von was Zowa geht, I demolte der Seder als Niker, nicht nur wenn gefühlt sich in Asdei Krov bin Milchoma, a viele nicht nur wenn gefühlt sich in die Kasarmes in den Beis, wo Anschi Zowa gefühlt sich oder Beholchi Barchei, a viele Bachilose und Bishiyose, und a viele Bishas schläft, in der Schlafen von einer Soldat, von einer Zowa, ist anders. Der Cheda Schlafzer ist anders, die Tnue von seinen Evlim und der Leben Hashina-Shalei. Eber hat nur gewähnt, bei Zowa, bei Kumin dort dem Chinuch HaMasim, schlaft anders wie einer, was nicht genießt soll. Allachas kame wie kame, beim Gehe zu Zowa Hashem, was gleich wie Yotze Be'avir Oilach. I do der Chol Echad Ve'echad, der Nefesh Hashem ist B'Yisroi. I Chelek Elakam Mimar, Loshon Apostel, wie der Baal HaGiule Meisef in Tanya Bir Baze, aber das Chelek Elakam Mimar Mamash, wo ein Mann der Nofach mit Tefin Nofach, und wenn der Nofach bei Yippah Bapov Nishmas Chayim, gleich wie geht Reis Le'avir Oelam, sei ein Jüngler oder ein Mädel, ich schein dort der bei Achileke, der kam im Mal Mamosch, bechol Echad Wachas mehr. Ich soll das, bis mit den See Madrid, aber bechol Schoß Hayem wa Alayla, seine See Zivis Hashem, Achilek Miser, seine See, wenn sie lernen Teres Hashem und mit sie Mechanech Lekium, Mitzvahs Hashem. Und Achilek Miser in Kol Maasecha, darf man die Eiche dämmelt wissen, als in Jonen wies. Ab Neres Lehoye, dem Cheshech, von Cheshech Yechasse Ores Mitzada Brio, darf man haben dem Ner Mitzvah und Teiro die Lichtigkeit von Teiro, wo sie dürfen das bringen, mit Beisam, und bechol Asviva Shalem, und bechol Hoir Shalem, was so dämmelt wird das Scholim, zwischen den Scheus, wenn die Talmid und Talmide Farbar und Bas Mitzvah gefinden sich bei Beis HaSefer, nicht die Scheus, wenn gefindet sich nicht bei Beis HaSefer, Adra bei Arish Sova, bei einer, was gefindet sich bei Sova, ist Kohomor Leil, mit der Loschen Rambam, bei Achillossi und bei Siyossi, und bei Tiyule, und alle 10 Sachen, wie rechnen dort nicht, gefindet sich, und sie nicker, ados Achochem, nicker, Azarish, Atel von Zova Hashem. Und das hat nicht verbunden, hat noch mehr Kasher sein und Meache sein, und Mechazig sein, die Scheiches benähen, und die Scheiches sehen mit Teres Hashem und Mitzvahs Hashem. Durch den Linien, jeder von sie soll haben an Nos, in Sefer HaTeiro, und wenn du über Baruch, wegen der Sefer Teiro, was der erste hat nicht in Israel gewählt, Al-Yad in Yerushalayim Atiko und der Hemscher beim Kessel Marovi. Und der Halte Mieten schreiben die zweite. Kehler sein Abdik, alle Kinder, soll jeder Kind, sei ja Jüngere, sei ja Mädel, bekommen an Nos Betero, wo Teres der Chatero Nitzchis und Teres Chaims ha-lebedige Tere und macht lebendig den Leben von jeder Rieden, also sein Achayim Akruim Lishmom, gleich wie bekommt, den Teir, als ist Achay, wo das Berega Rishim, Shiyotzo La'avir Hoelo, so ist Schein Dine, Kechai Lechol Dov, Gemevuet Ba'aloche Bepashtus, soll das werden a Kesher Amiti, wollen das a Kesher durch Teira Semes, und a Kesher Nitzchi, wollen a Teira hi Nitzchi.
With materials from the Living Archive, established by the Rohr Family Foundation.
Okay. Good vach, everybody. Good vach.
Good vach.
Good vach.
I'd like to dedicate our story tonight to
Good vach.
Good vach. Tonight's the upshenish of my third cousin, Menachem Mendel ben Rabbi Zev Wolf. Beschus for him, Auswachsen, Teure Chub Meis Tevim, Mechosish Meim Velamden. And as Rebbe would often wish people, even greater chassid than his father, which is not such a easy feat. Anyways, the story we began about the Rashbatz, just to recap. Okay, I will say his mother's name as well. Usually by bracha you say the father's name. His mother's name is Menachem Mendel ben Esther Yechevet. The schus for him, Terechul Meisim Tevin. I started this story 2 weeks ago about Reb Shmuel Betzal Sheftel. It's a bit of a controversial story, and I did get some negative feedback. People were asking me why am I sharing the story, which seems to violate a little bit of the Chafetz Chaim principle. It doesn't reflect so well on those who oppose Chassidus. And someone
Rabbi,
was like, hold on. We'll talk later. Let me share this first. So I just want to share that, first of all, the Rav Hirsch that I was mentioning in the story of Hershela was not the famous Rav Hirsch, who wrote a commentary in the Chumash and was a very prominent rabbi in Germany who caused many thousands of people to do tshuva. I even heard that the Rebbe Rashbatz said about Rav Hirsch that if he would have been in Germany at the same time, he would have done the same as Rav Hirsch. That's what I heard. Anyways, but the story is an important one to share, even though I'm not saying a scary part, Rosie. Don't worry. You could open up your ears. There's a scary part tonight. But anyways, the story is an important story to share because it really expresses the sacrifice that Hasidim had to learn Tanya, to learn Hasidus, and it gives us a little bit of an insight of how valuable Hasidus is and what kind of sacrifice people made to be able to learn Hasidus, and we shouldn't take it for granted, and we should really dedicate ourselves to this beautiful gift that Hashem has given our generation. So with no further ado, continuing on where we were up to in the story, Reb Shmuel Betzal Sheftel, as I mentioned last time, was a Melamed. He was a teacher of the Reb Marash, Reb Rashab, and the Frierdiker Rebbe, and also he was a mashpia, he was a mentor in the yeshiva of Tomchei Tmimim in Lubavitch. And in where we got up to in the story was how he was being raised by his mother and by his stepfather, who was his uncle, who had married his mother. And he had become very curious about the ways of the Hasidim, and he noticed a lot of incredible character traits in the Hasidim, and therefore he wanted to hang out with them and learn from them. But he was frightened because at that time there was such an opposition to Hasidim that it was actually dangerous. It was literally dangerous to hang around Hasidim, as you shall see in the story how dangerous it was. But he really felt that this was something that really was worth risking his life for, because he felt that there's something really special about it. And he managed to find a chas whose name was Moshe, one of the employees of Rabbi Yitzchak the Tailor, which is another time we'll talk maybe about Rabbi Yitzchak the Tailor, a story in himself. So he learned from Moshe about the history of the Hasidim, and he asked Moshe if, in addition to telling him about the learning with him just himself, he wanted to experience the learning of the Hasidim as a group. The Hasidim would meet together 3 times a week to study Gemara in depth. And Rabbi Shmuel Betzal later recounted that although he was a very gifted person, and he learned with the rabbi of the town, dedicated himself for every day studying with him for many hours. But he said, had he not seen it himself, he would never have believed the incredible depth with which the Hasidim studied the Gemara. He said, if I had not seen it with my eyes and heard it with my ears, I could not have imagined the incredible depth that they studied the Gemara. But besides the Gemara, they also studied together Tanya. And he went to their Beis Medrash, and he sat together with Ramesha, and Ramesha would sit next to him, explain to him anything that he'd understand at the Tanya, he would explain it to him. And he really enjoyed studying the Tanya, and he would talk over with Ramesha afterwards, and he would explain it to him. Rabbi Shmuel Betzal later recounted when he was a senior mashpia, a mentor in the city of Lubavitch. He says, you don't know how much we appreciate hearing things from the elder Hasidim. He said, when I would hear one thing from Moshe, I would spend 6 hours to study it over. I would repeat it in my mind again and again, many, many times until I fully understood it. In the language, in the Hasidic lexicon, he used to say to the young students, he used to say, you guys are like fattened calves who don't know what you're being given. I would hear one teaching from Moshe, and I would go over and over it again and again for many hours, just 6 hours. I would study things over. I trained my mind to repeat things over again and again until I was able to concentrate on one concept for 3 hours straight. For 3 hours straight, it was able just to think. Anyways, so he's going to this Beis Medrash, he's learning, and David is for you to put your camera on, that would be great, because I'd like to see your face. Anyways, he used to go to the Beis Medrash, I used to learn with the Chassidim, and he really loved it. One day, he's learning this passage in Tanya. It was actually chapter 12 in Tanya, the passage which talks about how if somebody wrongs you, the Alter Rebbe says the Zohar says how we should learn from Yosef and his brothers, and if its slightest feeling of anger or animosity or hatred comes in your mind, the Alter Rebbe says what you should do is you should push it out of your mind with both hands, and you should treat the person that you're angry with love and respect. Do the exact opposite of what he did to you. Just like Yosef was kind to his brothers who hurt him, so too should Jew learn from Yosef, do exactly the same thing. Now, although the author officially of this story in the Hatamim doesn't say the author is, it's pretty clear from various sources that this was actually the previous Rebbe wrote the story. He doesn't explain what was significant about this chapter of Tanya being taught at this juncture of the story, which you'll see, which is very significant, but it makes me think that perhaps this was a message for him in his life to how he should look at all the torment that he experienced at the hands of the detractors of the Chassidim. Anyways, he was having a hard time understanding this concept, and he told Ramesha it's hard for him. What should he do? Ramesha said to him, take the Tanya home, take it with you, and review it. And he reviewed it again. And this became a recurring thing. He would take the Tanya with him, a small volume of Tanya that he had, he would take it with him. And he would sit at night in the synagogue and he would review it again and again. And one night, he's reviewing this passage, chapter 12 in Tanya, and he's going over it again. It's 3 or 4 in the morning. He's going over and he's saying it out loud. And someone sees how he's studying so beautifully in such a melodious tune. Someone walks into the synagogue and he sits down next to him, just listening to how he's learning, he loves, just enjoying the guys. It's such a beautiful thing. Rashbatz later recounted, he said that the original Misnagdim, those original detractors of the Chassidim, they actually were very refined individuals, and they actually suspected the Chassidim of going against the Torah. But he said that the subsequent generation that he lived in, they had no idea who the Chassidim were. They didn't really know anything about the Chassidim, and they just were following blindly the hatred that they were given as children, and they were attacking the Chassidim without really making any investigation. They really didn't know at all what the Chassidim were doing at all. Anyways, this guy's listening to him, and Rashbatz doesn't notice him because he's so engrossed in his studies. And then while he's listening, the guy approaches him, and he's sitting next to him. Rashbatz looks up and he sees the guy's looking at him. And he got very frightened. He goes, oi, 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 and he took the Tanya and he put it in his pocket. And the man realized something's unusual over here. So he says, what's wrong? I am enjoying listening to you. This is really, really nice. What are you learning? Rashbatz thought that the man really was playing around with him, that he knew what he was studying. And he got frightened, and the man realized that something's wrong over here. And he went over to Rashbatz and he wrestled with him until he pulled the book out of his pocket, and he opened it up, and he didn't know what this book was until he got to the word Tzadikim Beinim Rishayim, which he knew that was something that the Kat studied. He knew this was something that the sect, as the Misnagdim, the detractors of Chassidim would call the Chassidim at the time, they called them the Kat. They called them the heretics. And so he couldn't believe it. Here is this boy who was so gifted. And that morning, right by the earliest minyan, he went over to Reb Hershela and he told Reb Hershela what he had discovered. This boy is studying the teachings of the Kat. He showed him the Tanya. And Reb Hershela says, God has given you a great schus. The man said, yes, he was studying the book, and with the help I did for the sake of God, I fought and I wrestled with him and I got the book out of his hands. Herschel says, yes, God has given you a great merit. You need to go call his stepfather, his uncle, right away, so I should tell him what's going on. The uncle comes to Herschel and he tells his uncle, look who you're raising, look what he's doing. This boy that you're raising in your home, look what's happening to him. He's going to the ways of heresy. He's going against the Torah. Meanwhile, Rashbatz, he went into the rafters, into the roof of the synagogue. There was like a little hole over there. I was able to observe everything that's going on in the synagogue, and he saw the first minyan had prayed and left, and he decided that this would be forgotten. Like the guy had noticed him, but nothing's going to happen. He'll be okay. He didn't realize what was going on. He went down in the synagogue and he prayed, and then he went home. When he came home, his uncle greeted him at the house. As soon as he stepped in the door of the house, he had a board, and he hit him in the forehead with the board very hard. And he started, after he hit him with the board, and he started beating him with his hands. He beat him so much until until he fainted. And his mother was so frightened, she started screaming, and he awoke because he heard his mother's screams. But his step kept on beating him. And he told his wife, you know why you're a woman and you have mercy, but you don't know what you're doing. This boy is going in the path of heresy. Wouldn't you rather that he died as a kosher Jew before he leaves Judaism, rejects Judaism? He keeps on beating him. And finally he stops beating him. And it takes a couple of days for him to recover from this beating. And after a few days pass, and he returns to his strength. He goes back to the synagogue as he always would study Torah, and he goes back to study with Rav Hirschel. But instead of studying with Rav Hirschel the regular subjects, Rav Hirschel starts talking to him about his great sin, and he says to him, "Will you stop your ways? Will you go back to the Hasidim?" And Rav Shmuel Betzalel started explaining to the rabbi who the Hasidim are and what they're doing. And the rabbi saw, Rav Hirschel saw, that Rav Shmuel Betzalel knew a lot better about the Hasidim than he did. And he couldn't respond to Rav Shmuel Betzalel's arguments because Rav Shmuel Betzalel knew a lot more. And he realized that he was, from the perspective of the rabbi, that he was caught by the cat, he was caught by this group, and he wouldn't be able to get him out of their clutches. And he told this to the uncle, the stepfather, Shmuel Betzalel, that this guy he's stuck. I can't convince him otherwise. He's stuck. He's not going to go back to, he's not leaving the Hasidim. I can't convince him otherwise. From that day, the uncle decided he's not going to keep Shmuel Betzalel in his house. He doesn't want to keep this apikoros, this heretic in his house. And the rabbi told everyone in the synagogue how this boy has been captured by the cat, and he told everyone that they should stay away from him. And although he was allowed to stay in the synagogue and study, but everyone, first of all, he was very hungry because he no food anymore from his home. He couldn't go home. But besides being hungry, people also would constantly ridicule him. They would call him, you're a heretic, you're not bikoros, you're a min, all kinds of derogatory terms, and they really caused him pain. Doesn't say exactly what they did, doesn't say if they slapped him or beat him, but they spoke in a derogatory way to him all the time. And his mother would bring him a dry bread, so he had something to eat. And every day he had this dry bread that she would bring him, including Shabbos. She brought him this dry bread. And Shabbos morning, after the prayers are over, he walks out of the town and he turns to God. He starts crying to God. He says, God, you're the father of orphans. Rav Shmuel Betzalel, as I mentioned last time, he lost his father at a young age. He says, God, you're the father of orphans. I just want to go in your path, in the path of truth, in your path of God. I want to go in your way. If the path of Misnagdim is the correct path, the path of the Tractors of Chassidim is the correct path, I'll go in that way. If the path of the Chassidim is the correct path, I'll go in that way. Show me a sign which path I should go to, which path is the correct path. I don't know. God, you show me a sign. And he says to God, similar to the way that Eliezer said to God, may the first person I meet be the wife of Yitzchak, wife of my servant Avram. So too the Rashbatz said to God, God, may the first person I meet be the one that I'm supposed to follow in their path. And he finishes his prayer and he starts walking back to town, and from a great distance he sees Reb Hershela and two of the Misnagdim. And he was very distraught because in his heart he had felt that he should go in the path of the Chassidim. But he said this to God and he was very distraught, but he's hoping maybe the Chassidim will come first. still time. It's still a great distance between till he got up to Reb Hirschele. Maybe one of the Hasidim will come. And sure enough, 2 Hasidim come out of their synagogue. Oh, the Hasidim are coming. But then they took off and they went down a side route and they left the road. And he's upset. He's going to meet Reb Hirschele, but he's still a chance. He might meet someone else. He starts walking, and sure enough, 2 Hasidim come out of the Hasidic Beis Medrash, and one of them was actually this Rav Moshe who had taught him, and everyone in town was talking about this boy who was so gifted and how the rabbi, Reb Hirschele, had spent so much time with him, and he was captured by the kat, and how his uncle had kicked him out of the house, and the whole town was talking about him. And you could see the Hasidim, Rav Moshe, and the other Hasidim were talking about him too, and they saw him from a distance. They didn't know everything that was going on with him. They noticed that he had stopped coming, so they thought that maybe he had stopped coming because he didn't consider the study that he was getting valuable. So they screamed out to him, "Hey, Shulm Batzalel, what's going on with you? If all the wisdom in the world we poured onto you, you're still not going to realize what the truth is." Something like that. And Shulm Batzalel, as a response, he told them everything that happened to him. And even though Rav Moshe was very poor, and by the standards of living at that time, very poor means that, really poor, like to, for food. But still, Rav Moshe took him to his house, and he fed him, and he stayed in Rav Moshe's house. And Rav Moshe would teach him, and he recalled later in life how special those days are with Rav Moshe. One day, he happened to meet Rav Hirschele, and Rav Hirschele asked him if he repented his ways. And instead of responding to that, he started asking Rav Hirschele a question about a subject matter that they had learned together. He asked him a very strong question about something they had studied together. And Rav Hirschele didn't know the answer, so he started saying his own answer. And Rav Hirschele was really, really impressed. He says, I don't know what's going on with you, but your Torah study has certainly taken an ascent. You're certainly elevated in your level of Torah study. That's incredible, the learning that you're doing. And while they're talking, Rav Shmuel Batzalel feels a blow to his head, which caused his face to snap back and forth, that he turned his left to the left, and it was such a strong blow, it made his head turn to left and right and knocked his hat off. And as he's going to pick up his hat, blood is flowing from his mouth and from his nose, and he gets hit again and again. These misnagdim had come and started beating him, and their Hirschele and the other more great Torah scholars tried to stop them, but they kept on beating him. And they would have killed him, but Reb Hirschele summoned the Hasidim, and all the Hasidim came together to defend him from these blows, and they were able to protect him. But he had passed out, and he only awoke 3 weeks later in the synagogue of the Hasidim, and a doctor had examined him and discovered that he had pneumonia and his brain was swelling. And he was lying there for days, unconscious, mouth was open with great fever, and he was really, really, he wasn't well. But finally, they nursed him back to health, and the Hasidim were afraid to let him go outside, lest he be beaten up again. And so from this summertime, when he had started to stay there until the month of Shvat, he stayed there, and the Hasidim taught him Gemara and Hasidus. And that's the part that we will share for tonight. God willing, we'll continue the story, Mirz Hashem, next week, Mirz Hashem. Any questions or comments before we, Yitzchak, want to say something before we stop for tonight?
Cliffhanger, eh?
Baruch ben Moshe HaKohen. My daughter told me to stop by today. Thanks for stopping by. God willing, we'll continue the story next week. Have good vach, Shoshana. Good vach, Baruch. Good vach, Beryl. Good vach. Yes, not yes, Yitzchak.
I really enjoy your Malava Malka programs.
Thank you.
I enjoy everything you do. You're a great man.
Thank you for the compliment.
You deserve it.
Thank you. Good vach, Yitzchak. Good vach.
What I want to tell you, I would love to tell you, not in public.
Okay, we'll talk later then.
I'll give you a call on your number later.